Almost every person in the 6 cases you're about to see did something right. They carried a rifle. They knew the ground. They had years of hard-won judgment about how a bear behaves. And every one of them met a bear that did not read from the same book they did. Over the next 6 cases, we're going to work through exactly that gap. The distance between the bear a person prepared for and the bear that actually arrived. We'll look at what the evidence showed, how the animal behaved and why, and what the wildlife authorities concluded afterward. Not the spectacle of it, the mechanism. Because the difference between a defensive bear and a hunting one, between a bear you can move and a bear you cannot, is the difference between the people who walked out and the people who did not. Watch what these cases have in common. In almost every one, the danger wasn't the bear itself. It was an assumption. Ray Halloran decided to pack the last quarter of his bull elk out in the dark, rather than leave the meat hanging overnight. That decision put him on his back under a grizzly boar that weighed close to 700 pounds, with his lower jaw broken in 2 places and 40 minutes of crawling between him and his truck. He was 51 years old, hunting alone in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness of south-central Montana in the last week of September 1987. He had killed the bull at first light, a good 6-point that dropped in a stringer of timber above a creek. It took him the whole day to bone out 3 quarters and haul them to the trailhead, 1 load at a time, 2 miles each way. By the time he had the last quarter left, the light was going. A careful man leaves that quarter and comes back at dawn with company. Halloran had a freezer to fill and a long drive home in the morning. He went back for it. Here is the thing every experienced hunter in grizzly country already knows, and the thing Halloran knew too. A gut pile and a carcass in the timber is a dinner bell. In this ecosystem, in late September, a boar is in hyperphagia, packing on fat for the den, and he will travel miles toward the smell of blood and rumen. By the time Halloran walked back into that timber, the bear had already claimed the kill. What Halloran read as his elk was, to the bear's elk. He came up the creek in near dark, rifle slung, headlamp throwing a narrow cone. He was 30 yards out when the beam caught movement low and wide over the carcass, and a sound came back at him that was not an elk. It was a short, hard huff, then the clack of teeth. The bear stood. Halloran got the rifle off his shoulder, a Winchester Model 70 and .338 Winchester Magnum, loaded with 250 grain Nosler partitions, a cartridge built for exactly this animal. He never got to use it the way it was designed to be used. A grizzly closes 30 yards in under 2 seconds. There is no aimed second shot at that range. Halloran fired once as the bear came, and the round went in behind the left shoulder, through a lung. A lethal hit that did nothing at all for the next several seconds. A lung-shot bear does not know it is dying. It arrives. The rifle was knocked wide as the animal hit him chest high and drove him down the creek bank, and then the weight was on him and the world narrowed to noise and pressure. The first bite took the left side of his face and the jaw, and he heard it before he felt it. A wet, structural sound that did not seem to belong to him. The second closed on his shoulder and turned him half over, and for one moment he was looking straight up into the underside of the animal, close enough to smell the elk on its breath. Then instinct did what thinking could not. He did the one thing that kept him alive. He went face down, laced his hands behind his neck, and pulled his knees up under his chest. He stopped fighting, and he stopped making noise. To a bear defending a food cache, a threat that goes still and quiet stops being a threat. The mauling lasted perhaps 15 seconds and felt like none, and all of his life at once. Then the pressure came off. The lung shot was working now. The bear moved off the carcass down into the alder and lay down to die about 80 yards away, though Halloran did not know that and would not have believed it. He lay still for a long count. Then he got his headlamp, which was hanging by its strap, and he started for the truck. He could not close his mouth. He held his own jaw in one hand and crawled and walked the 2 miles out, and he drove himself the first 14 miles of gravel before he met another truck. Medical findings and aftermath. Halloran reached a hospital in Billings a little under 5 hours after the attack. The damage was concentrated as it usually is. On the head and the arms he never raised. He had a comminuted fracture of the left mandible, the loss of 4 teeth, a degloving injury to the left cheek, and puncture wounds to the left shoulder and scalp that exposed bone. He did not have a single defensive wound on his hands because he never used them to fight, and that is precisely why his hands still worked. At 51, with no major artery involved, his physiological reserve carried him. The real threat came after. Bear bites drive oral and environmental bacteria deep, and he ran a serious wound infection on the 4th day that required a second surgery and a long course of antibiotics. He needed 3 reconstructive procedures over the following year and never regained full sensation in the left side of his face. Incident analysis. What led to this outcome was a chain of small, reasonable decisions that only look reckless from the far side of it. Going back for the last quarter was efficient. Doing it at dusk, alone, into timber holding a fresh carcass, stacked the odds against him one choice at a time. The core error was not the bear and not the rifle. It was walking a blood trail into low light in hyperphagia season, when a claimed carcass is the single most defended object in the woods. The rifle, chambered exactly right and loaded exactly right, still could not solve a problem that started at 30 yards, because terminal ballistics and stopping power are not the same thing. A mortally wounded bear still has seconds of function, and seconds were all this one needed. What was done right is the reason there is a survivor to interview. The instant he was on the ground, Halloran stopped resisting, protected the back of his neck, and went silent, and a defensive bear disengaged the moment he stopped registering as a fight. Practical takeaway. A downed animal left in the timber belongs to the woods by nightfall. If you have to return to a carcass in bear country, go in daylight, go with a partner, make noise on the approach, and treat any sound near the kill as a bear until proven otherwise. And if a defensive bear does put you down, the counterintuitive move is the survivable one. Cover your neck, hold still, and give it nothing to fight. On a wind-scoured bay in the Canadian Arctic, a man walking back to his snowmobile would learn that not every bear is defending something. Some are simply hunting. David Anawak was found with the wounds concentrated at the back of the neck and the base of the skull, which is where a bear puts them when it is feeding, not defending. His rifle was still slung across his back, the safety on, a full magazine, never brought to bear. The distance from the last clear boot print to where he was found was just under 200 yards, and the bear had covered most of it without being heard. This was Wager Bay, on the northwest coast of Hudson Bay in what is now Ukusik-Salik, in the second week of November 1993. Start with the ice, because the ice is the whole story. Western Hudson Bay freezes late some years, and in the fall of 1993 it froze later than most. Polar bears are not land animals. They are sea ice hunters, and a seal killed from the ice is the only efficient meal they have. Every week the bay stays open in November is a week those bears go without the fat they need, and a large male at the end of a long ice-free season is not a bear defending cubs or a carcass. He is a hungry apex predator on the wrong side of the calendar, and he has begun to look at the land the way he looks at the ice. Anawak was 34, an experienced hunter from the coast who had traveled this country his whole life. He was checking a line of country between 2 cabins on foot, his snowmobile parked where the drifts got soft. Every account of what he did that afternoon says he did it correctly. He carried a rifle. He knew the ground. He was moving into a light, steady wind off the bay, which meant he could smell nothing coming from behind him and, more to the point, nothing behind him could smell him either. The wind that kept his scent off the bay also meant the bear that was already on the land, downwind and to his back, had every advantage the situation could hand out. A defensive bear announces itself. It huffs, it pops its jaw, it makes a bluff charge, because its goal is to make the threat leave. A hunting polar bear does none of that. It does not want you to leave. It stalks, it uses cover and low ground, it closes the distance in silence, and the first sign of it is contact. That is the single most important thing to understand about this kind of attack, and it is the thing that makes it so rare and so nearly unsurvivable. Anawak never heard it. The tracks read later showed the bear had paralleled him for a stretch, matching his pace along a low bench, dropped into a shallow drainage where the snow lay deep and quiet, and come up behind him at a run over the last 40 yards. There was no wandering in the trail, no browsing, no hesitation. It was the track of an animal that had chosen a target and committed to it. And it read, to the men who followed it, exactly like the approach a bear makes on a seal hauled out on the ice. A large male polar bear on this coast can push 900 pounds, and it does not need to bite to end a fight. The first blow, a forepaw across the shoulders, put Anawak down. The rifle stayed where it was, slung and useless, because there is no drawing a slung rifle from under a bear that is already on top of you. What followed was not a mauling in the defensive sense. It was feeding behavior, directed and unhurried, and it was over quickly. A hunter from the second cabin found the snowmobile that evening, backtracked in the last light, and found the bear still on the site. He did not approach. He went back for others, and the bear was driven off the following morning. An old, thin male with worn teeth and almost no fat left on a frame built to carry hundreds of pounds of it. Medical findings and aftermath. The pattern of injury told investigators everything about which kind of attack this was. Defensive bears bite the face, the arms, the scalp, and break contact. The wounds are severe but scattered, and the victim is often left alive because the bear's goal was to neutralize, not consume. Anawak's injuries were the opposite, focused at the neck and skull, with feeding wounds to the torso, and no defensive injuries on the hands at all, because there had been no time to raise them. Death would have come within a minute or two from the initial trauma. There was nothing a first responder could have changed, and there was no bleeding control or wound care question to analyze, because this was not a survivable event once contact was made. The only variables that ever mattered were the ones that came before contact, out on the open ground with the wind in the wrong quarter. Incident analysis. Before we look at what could have changed the outcome, we have to be honest that almost nothing in the final minute could. What actually decided this was structural, not tactical. A hungry, ice-stressed male polar bear in a late freeze year is the most dangerous large predator a person can share ground with, precisely because it hunts people the way it hunts seals, without warning and without a threat display to react to. Anawak did the ordinary things right and still lost, and that is the hard lesson. Competence in the field does not lower predatory risk the way it lowers defensive risk. Where the margin existed, it existed early. Traveling alone on foot, into the wind, in a season when the bay had not yet frozen, removed every early warning system a person has. A partner watching the back trail, a scent carried ahead, a rifle already in hand rather than slung. None of those guarantee survival against a stalking bear. But they are the only things that move the odds at all, and by the nature of the day, he had set none of them in his favor. Practical takeaway. In polar bear country during a late freeze-up, treat the land itself as occupied hunting ground. Travel in pairs, keep a firearm in your hands and not on your back, and watch your back trail as often as the way ahead, because the danger is the bear you never hear. A polar bear that does not bluff, huff, or hesitate is not testing you. It has already decided. Far to the south, in a rib of the northern Rockies, a woman picking berries would walk into the exact opposite kind of bear, one that wanted only for her to be somewhere else. Paige Renner goes down face first into the huckleberry brush with a sow already on her back. 20 feet upslope, her sister Dana freezes with a bucket in one hand and a single cub crossing the ground between them. The whole thing is already happening before either woman has understood that the shape in the brush was a bear at all. Rewind 90 seconds. It is the third week of August, 1999. High on a huckleberry slope in the Selkirk Mountains of the Idaho Panhandle, one of the few pockets of the lower 48 where grizzlies were clawing their way back from near nothing. Renner is 39. She and her sister have picked this slope for years. The berries are heavy that August, And a heavy berry crop is exactly what pulls a grizzly sow and her cubs onto the same slope as the people. Both parties want the same thing in the same place, and the brush is chest high, and the wind is swirling. That is the whole recipe. Nobody did anything wrong except walk quietly into thick cover on a good berry year. Here is the mechanism that matters. A sow with cubs of the year is running one program above all others. Keep the space between a threat and my cubs clear. She is not hunting. She does not want to fight. What she cannot tolerate is a threat inside her circle, between her and her young, at a range too short to bluff. Renner walked into that circle without knowing it. She came over a small rise, pushing through brush that killed her sight lines and muffled her sound, and she came out 10 feet from a cub. The sow was on the other side of her. For the space of a breath, Renner was standing exactly where a grizzly mother is built never to allow anything to stand. There was no bluff charge, because a bluff is for distance, and there was no distance. The sow crossed the gap in under a second and hit her going downhill, which put all of that weight behind it. Renner was driven flat into the brush. She did the thing that works, and she did it fast, because some part of her had rehearsed it 100 times without ever believing she would use it. She stayed face down, wrapped her hands behind her neck, and kept her elbows in tight to protect her face and throat. She did not roll. She did not scream. She made herself a covered, unmoving shape on the ground. The contact lasted seconds. There were 2 hard bites to the back of the left shoulder and 1 raking swat that opened her scalp. And through all of it, she kept her hands locked and her elbows clamped and made no sound, though every muscle in her wanted to twist away from the weight and the noise. And then, above her, the cub bawled. That sound did the thing no human action could have done. The sow's program flipped from eliminate the threat to gather the young, instantly and completely. She came off Renner, wheeled, and pushed both cubs uphill and over the ridge. And in 4 or 5 seconds, the slope was empty and silent, except for Dinah screaming her sister's name. Renner stayed down another full minute, exactly as she should have, in case the bear circled back. Then she got to her knees, bleeding from the scalp and shoulder, and found that she could stand and walk, and that she was going to be all right. The walk out was its own kind of test. Dana reached her, pressed a folded flannel shirt against the scalp wound to slow the bleeding, and the 2 of them started down through the same chest-high brush that had hidden the sow, flinching at every branch that shifted. Renner covered the full 2 miles on her own feet, lightheaded and shaking with cold, talking out loud the whole way to keep herself moving, because stopping felt like the more dangerous choice. They did not see the bear again, but every dark gap in the alder held one in her mind, the entire way down to the truck, and it would keep holding one for a long time after. Medical findings and aftermath. Renner's injuries were serious but survivable, and their pattern is the signature of a textbook defensive attack that ended the moment the bear's goal was met. She had 2 puncture and crush wounds to the left shoulder and upper back, a 6-inch scalp laceration that bled heavily the way scalp wounds always do, and deep bruising along the spine where the initial impact landed. Critically, she had no wounds to the front of the throat, the face, or the hands, because she never turned over and never raised her arms into the bear's reach. That is not luck. That is what the neck cover position buys you. She walked out 2 miles under her own power, took 30-some staples and sutures, and was released the next day. The lasting cost was less about tissue than about sleep. For months, thick brush and the smell of huckleberry brought the whole 90 seconds back at full volume. Incident analysis. What happened here was not a failure of judgment so much as a collision of 2 parties doing ordinary things in the same square of ground. The exposure came from a specific combination. 2 people moving quietly through chest-high brush, on a heavy berry year, in an active grizzly recovery zone, with swirling wind that carried their scent nowhere useful. Quiet is a virtue on a trail and a liability in blind cover, because it removes the one warning that prevents a sudden encounter entirely. What went right is the reason this is a survival story and not a fatality. Renner did not run, which triggers pursuit, and she did not fight, which prolongs the attack and draws bites to the face and throat. She dropped, covered her neck, and held still. And against a defensive sow, that is the single most effective thing a person can do. The bear was never trying to kill her. It was clearing its circle, and the instant the cub called, the threat stopped mattering. Practical takeaway. In thick brush on a good berry year, make noise on purpose. Talk, call out, clap at blind rises. The encounter you want is the one that never happens because the sow heard you coming and moved her cubs off long before you arrived. And if you do surprise a bear at close range and it comes, fight every instinct that tells you to run or curl up facing it. Go face down, lace your hands behind your neck, keep your elbows tight, and hold still. A defensive grizzly is measuring whether you are still a threat. Give it a reason to decide you are not, and give the answer time to work. Carry bear spray where you can reach it in one motion, but know that in a sub-second charge, your body position may be the only tool you actually get to use. On a fog-wrapped island off the Alaska coast, a deer hunter would come face to face with a bear so large that the local guides had given it a name. The fog came off the Gulf of Alaska in slow sheets that morning and sat in the alders until the whole island smelled of salt and rotting kelp and something older underneath it. It was 38 degrees Fahrenheit and dead still, the kind of coastal quiet where the only sound is water moving somewhere you cannot see. Down in the muskeg, where a game trail cut through the Devil's Club, the alders had been pushed flat in a corridor almost 4 feet wide, and the trail had been walked so long and so heavily that it wore into the ground in a double row of steps, one depression for each set of prints, laid down by generations of the same animal walking in the same tracks. Kurt Nieland came onto Afognak Island in the second week of November 2002 to hunt Sitka black-tailed deer. He was 45, a careful hunter from the mainland who had drawn the trip for years, and he knew Afognak carried some of the largest brown bears on Earth, bears that share the island with the deer at a density found almost nowhere else. Afognak's bears are Kodiak browns, the biggest brown bears in the world, and a coastal boar that has spent his life on salmon and berries, and the occasional deer can push 1,400 pounds. The guides on that side of the island had a name for the dominant boar of that drainage. They called him the Landlord, because everything that lived there on his terms. And every hunter who worked those alders was, in a sense, a tenant who had not yet met the man who owned the ground. Nyland was following a blood trail. He had shot a small buck at last light the evening before and lost it in the fog, and he had come back at first light to finish the recovery, which is exactly the situation that stacks a deer hunter against a bear. A gut-shot deer bleeding out overnight in that country does not stay the hunter's deer for long. Nyland worked the trail into a wall of alder, rifle ready, and what he did not understand until it was far too late was that the reason the blood trail simply ended was that something had already collected the deer and was lying up with it not 15 feet away. The Landlord came out of the alders low and fast and without a sound of warning. Nyland got the rifle up, a Remington 700.30-06 Springfield, loaded with 180 grain bullets, a rifle built for deer and elk and thoroughly outmatched by what was coming, and fired once from the hip as the bear closed. The round went in high on the shoulder and lodged in heavy muscle and bone, and against 1,400 pounds of driving Kodiak boar, it did almost nothing except make the animal angrier. There is a hard truth in the ballistics here. A cartridge that reliably kills a deer or an elk is marginal on a bear that size at contact distance, because stopping a charge is about breaking the central nervous system or the heavy bone that drives it, and a single hip-fired round is not going to find either. The bear knocked him down the slope and the rifle was gone. Nyland did the only thing left. He rolled onto his face, jammed his hands behind his neck, drove his elbows in, and made himself dead weight in the Devil's Club. He took the bear on his back and his legs and did not fight and did not cry out. He felt the pressure of a bite close over his thigh and grind. and he felt the animal's breath and the impossible weight of a paw between his shoulder blades, and he held still through all of it. After what he later guessed was 30 seconds, the boar stopped. It stood over him a moment longer. Then it went back to the deer it had already claimed, because Nyland had stopped being a rival and become just another still thing on the ground. Nyland waited, then crawled downhill until he could stand, and got himself the 1.5 miles back to the beach. Medical findings and aftermath. Nyland survived with the kind of damage a large Kodiak inflicts almost casually. He had a crushed and lacerated left thigh where a single bite had closed and torn, deep enough to expose the femur, but by a margin of perhaps an inch, missing the femoral artery, the difference between the man who walks out and the man who does not. He had puncture wounds across the back and buttocks, 4 cracked ribs from the initial impact, and a deep scalp laceration. He lost a significant amount of blood on the crawl to the beach and was hypothermic by the time a float plane reached him. At 45, fit and quickly evacuated, he pulled through, but the thigh required multiple surgeries and a long rehabilitation, and he walked with a limp afterward. The deeper wound was the one that did not show. For 2 years he could not stand to be in thick brush, and the smell of wet alder would stop him where he stood. Incident analysis. What put Nyland under that bear was not a single mistake, but the oldest trap in coastal Alaska, following blood into blind cover on ground owned by an animal that treats a fresh carcass as its property. The land had been telling the story the whole time. The 4-foot corridor, the double rutted trail worn by one animal over years, the blood trail that simply stopped. And those are signs an experienced hand can read, but they read most clearly in hindsight. Before we credit what saved him, the honest accounting is that a .30-06 gave him a false sense of margin he did not have. The right tool for that ground is a heavier rifle, a partner, and a decision not to push into the alders alone at all. What kept him alive was the thing that had nothing to do with the rifle. He surrendered the fight the instant he hit the ground, protected his neck and skull, and gave a possessive bear no reason to keep working on him once he was no longer competing for the deer. Practical takeaway. On Kodiak or a fognac, treat every fresh carcass and every blood trail as a bear's property until you have proven otherwise, and never follow one into blind alder alone. Carry enough gun for the biggest animal on the ground, not the one you came to hunt. But know that if a Kodiak reaches you, the fight is already lost, and your body position is the tool that decides whether you walk off the island. Go down, cover up, and wait it out. Across the ocean, in the high pastures of the Carpathians' western cousins, a shepherd would make a stand over a dead ewe and learn that some ground is not worth defending. Andre Balaz walked up the pasture toward a feeding brown bear to drive it off a dead ewe, carrying a shepherd's axe and 40 years of certainty that a bear would always give ground to a man. It did not give ground, and that certainty cost him his life inside of a minute, 300 yards above his own hut. He was 58, in the high summer pastures below Krajvan in the Tatra National Park of northern Slovakia, in the 3rd week of July 2006. He had run sheep on that mountain his whole adult life, the way his father had before him. And in all those years, the bears had kept to the timber and the men had kept to the open ground, and the arrangement had held. But the arrangement was changing, and Balaz was working from a rule book the mountain had quietly rewritten. Tatra bears had grown used to people, to the smell of the flocks and the food that came with them. And a bear that has lost its fear of a man is a fundamentally different animal from the one his father knew. He was about to meet that different animal with his father's assumptions. The bear was a female, not large by the standards of the world's brown bears, perhaps 450 pounds, but a European brown bear of that size is still an apex predator with the strength to break a horse's neck. She had pulled down a ewe at the edge of the flock at dawn, or found it dead and claimed it. It did not matter which. What mattered was that she was on a carcass, and she was not afraid, and she had decided the ewe was hers. Here is where the decisions stack. Balaz saw the bear on his ewe from the hut. The correct move, the move the park itself urges, was to let the sheep go. One ewe is a loss a shepherd can absorb. A bear on a carcass is the most single-mindedly possessive animal on that mountain, and the meat was already lost the moment she touched it. But a lifetime on that ground had taught him that a shout and a raised stick moved bears, and it had always been true, right up until it was not. He walked up the pasture shouting, axe raised, doing the exact thing that had worked 100 times before. She did not run. She gave one short warning, a huff, a step, and Balaz, reading the old rule book, took it as the beginning of a retreat and pressed forward. It was not a retreat. It was the last warning a possessive, human-habituated bear gives before it decides the threat has to be dealt with directly. She closed the last 30 feet in a rush and was on him before the axe came down. There is a moment, the other shepherd said afterward, when a man who has spent his life sure of his place on a mountain understands in a single second that he was wrong about all of it, and they saw that moment cross his face before the bear reached him. A brown bear kills a man with terrible efficiency. A blow that takes him off his feet bites to the head and neck, the whole weight of the animal driving him into the ground. Balaz got in one swing that glanced off her shoulder and changed nothing. The other shepherds, running up from the hut, could only shout and throw stones, and the bear held the ground over both the ewe and the man until she chose, unhurried, to drag the carcass into the trees and leave. From decision to death was less than a minute. The other shepherds reached the spot only after the bear had gone, drawn back into the trees with the ewe. They found the carcass dragged off into the timber and Balaz where he had fallen, the axe still lying near his open hand. None of them carried a rifle. On that mountain, in that trade, no one ever had, because no one had ever believed they would need one against an animal that had always, in living memory, given way to a raised voice and a raised arm. They carried that broken belief back down to the valley with him. Medical findings and aftermath. Balaz died at the scene from the initial trauma, before help could reach him from below. The injuries followed the pattern of a defensive brown bear attack carried to its lethal conclusion, crushing blows to the skull and a bite to the neck that severed major vessels, with the deep, focused damage concentrated where a bear ends a fight rather than scattered across a body it is trying only to warn off. His forearms carried the marks of the axe swing and of one raised arm, the only defense he had time to mount. At 58, hardened by a lifetime of mountain work, he still had no reserve that mattered against that force delivered that fast. This was never a survivable pattern, only a quick one. For the men who watched from 30 yards, unable to close the gap in time, the aftermath was its own kind of wound. Incident analysis. This outcome was decided not in the final minute, but in the decision to walk up the pasture at all. And understanding why a careful, experienced man made that choice is the whole point. Balaz was not reckless. He was operating on a model of bear behavior that had been accurate for 40 years and had gone silently out of date. The bears he grew up with feared people and yielded ground. The bear he met had been conditioned by years of easy food to fear nothing, and habituation is exactly what turns a shout and a stick from a deterrent into a trigger. The compounding error was the object of the confrontation, because a bear on a carcass will defend it to the point of killing, and no single sheep is worth testing that. The hardest lesson is the quiet one. The correct action required doing nothing and absorbing the loss, and for a man who had defended his flock his whole life, doing nothing was the one response his experience had never taught him. Practical takeaway. If a bear claims your livestock, let it have the animal. A carcass is not worth your life, and a bear feeding on one is the least likely of all bears to back down. In country where bears have grown used to people, throw out the old certainty that noise and a raised arm will always move them. A habituated bear may read your advance not as a threat to flee, but as a challenge to answer. Give ground. Put distance and solid cover between yourself and the animal. and report the conflict rather than resolving it yourself. On a scrap of frozen island at the top of the world, a research technician would discover that a polar bear needs no carcass, no cubs, and no provocation at all to come for a person. Sergei Nechayev was killed by a single bite that collapsed the back of his skull, 60 feet from a lit window. His torch was found still switched on, the beam pointed uselessly across the gravel, and a strip of his parka hung from the corner of the fuel shed 20 feet from his body. 4 other researchers were inside the hut when it happened, and by the time the fastest of them reached the door, less than a minute had passed. This was Wrangel Island, in the Chukchi Sea off the coast of Russia's far northeast, in the second week of October 2010. To understand this one, you have to understand where he was. Wrangel Island is one of the most important polar bear denning grounds on Earth. In some years, hundreds of bears come ashore. It is a place with more of these animals per square mile of coast than almost anywhere in the Arctic. And in the autumn, before the sea ice returns, those bears are stranded on the land and running out of the fat they built on the ice. The Chukchi Sea had been slow to freeze that fall. The bears had been on the island for weeks, and the ones still there in October were the hungry ones, patrolling the coast, testing everything that moved or smelled of food, including a small cluster of huts with 5 people in it. Nechayev was 29, a technician on a short autumn rotation, servicing instruments and generators. The station ran by hard rules for exactly this reason. Nobody outside alone after dark, a spotter at the window whenever someone stepped out, a flare pistol and a rifle by the door. Those rules exist because the danger here is not hypothetical, and they work when they are followed to the letter. On the evening it happened, the generator faltered, and Nechayev stepped out to the fuel shed to check it. It was a 60-foot walk on ground he had crossed a dozen times a day. He took his torch. In the routine of a task done a dozen times, the one rule that mattered slipped. No one was watching the window for the minute he was gone, and he had not taken the rifle for a job that would take 30 seconds. A predatory polar bear does not need the things that trigger other bears. There was no carcass here, no cubs, no den to defend, no provocation of any kind. There was only a large male at the end of a long ice-free season and a warm-blooded animal moving across open gravel in the dark. And to a bear in that condition, those 2 facts are the entire equation. It had almost certainly been in the camp's margins already, drawn by the smell of fuel and food and people, waiting in the low ground beyond the sheds. It came the way they come, silent, fast, committed, and the first anyone inside knew of it was a single shout, cut short. The bear took him at the fuel shed. When the others got the door open and put a light on the scene, the animal was already on the body, and it did not leave for the shouting or the banging of pans. It took a flare fired over its back to move it off, and even then it withdrew only to the edge of the light and stood there, unhurried, watching the hut. The 4 of them spent the night barricaded inside, the rifle across a table pointed at a door that would not have held, listening to the animal work its way around the walls, testing the shed, the drums, the window shutters. It did not leave. It circled the station until a helicopter reached them the following afternoon and drove it out onto the tundra, an old male carrying almost no fat on a 900-pound frame that had been built to carry a great deal of it. What the 4 of them pieced together afterward, from the tracks and the torn ground, was that the bear had been working the camp's shadows for some time before it struck. It had circled the fuel drums, left prints at the shuttered window of the bunk room, and tested the edges of a place full of food and people, until it found the one moment the place left itself open. Nechayev had not been careless in any way that would have looked careless from the inside. He had stepped into a single unguarded second, and the bear had been waiting with the patience it uses at a seal's breathing hole for exactly that. Medical findings and aftermath. The findings established, without ambiguity, that this was a predatory kill and that it was over in seconds. The fatal injury was a crushing bite to the base of the skull and upper neck. The killing bite of a large carnivore, delivered from behind and above, the way these bears take prey on the ice. There were feeding injuries to the torso and no defensive wounds on the hands or arms, because Nechayev had no forewarning and no time to turn or raise a guard. A male polar bear on that coast can weigh 900 pounds, and against that mass and that speed, a healthy 29-year-old had no more margin than a child. No medical response was possible or relevant. Death preceded awareness. The surviving 4 were physically unhurt and marked in ways that outlasted the rotation, and 2 of them never returned to Arctic fieldwork. Incident analysis. The temptation is to find the fatal error and stop there, and the error is real. A 30-second task done without the rifle, without a spotter, in the dark, in the middle of the highest concentration of hungry polar bears on the planet. But the deeper lesson is why a trained, rule-abiding person made that lapse, and the answer is the quiet erosion that routine works on discipline. The station's rules were correct and complete. What failed was the 100th repetition of a safe task, when a job crossed a dozen times feels too small to warrant the full protocol. That is the specific danger of a place like Wrangell. The threat is constant and invisible, so the guard has to be constant too, and constant vigilance is exactly what human attention is worst at sustaining. A stalking polar bear gives you nothing to react to in the final moment. The only defense that ever existed was the protocol that would have kept him from being alone, unwatched and unarmed for even 1 minute. And that night, it was 1 habit short. Practical takeaway. In true polar bear country, the protocol is the only thing standing between routine and catastrophe, and it does not get to relax for small tasks. Never step outside alone or unarmed. Never skip the spotter at the window because the job is short, and treat every trip across open ground in the dark as the dangerous act it actually is. The bear that kills you here will not warn you, will not be provoked, and will not need a reason. Your discipline is the whole defense, and it has to hold on the ordinary nights, because those are the only nights it is ever tested. Six cases, and the same thread running through all of them. The bear that defends a carcass, the sow clearing her circle, the hungry male that hunts on open ground. These are not one animal, and the mistake, again and again, was treating them as if they were. Read the animal in front of you, not the one your experience expects, and most of these encounters never become stories at all. If you want more survival breakdowns built on how these animals actually behave, subscribe and stay with us. We'll keep taking these apart, 1 case at a time, so the lesson costs you nothing to learn. Stay safe out there.
Hey, we need your help. If you've loved these terrifying true stories so far, we need your help to keep sharing them and create new episodes every week. Please grab your phone, scan the QR code now, and tap the subscribe button that opens on your screen.